Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are, the very first podcast of 2021. And I couldn't have wished for a better guest to come on than Mr. Nick Careen. So Nick, welcome. Really appreciate you coming on, and especially so early in the year.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's been a long time coming, Chris.
It has indeed, my friend. Now, Nick, I'll just introduce your position. I'm sure anybody who's watching or listening will know exactly who you are, but just in case. So Nick's the Senior Vice President, Airport Passenger Cargo and Security with IATA, and responsible for an awful lot of things, Nick, and even more to come. But before we get into that, I am so pleased to have you on. It's taken many years for me to be able to interview you. I think the last interview session we had between us was during the World Cargo Symposium, a long way back.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, but I enjoyed it. You're a man who's got a twinkle in his eye and always a smile not too far from his face, which is exactly what we need now at the moment going into this, what I hope is going to be an equally surprising year, but in a more positive sense than 2021. And as far as I'm concerned, good riddance to it. Can't be too pleased to get away from it. But there's always good things. I had my second granddaughter born in the year. So that was a blessing. So, there's always something good comes out of every piece of bad. But anyhow, that's about me. So Nick, thanks so much for coming on. Now, what I'd like to start with is, can you just give us a quick oversight of what 2020 meant to you? And obviously with hindsight, what things you would have liked to have seen done differently, or perhaps could have been done differently with the wisdom of hindsight.
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I need to think about that. I think that if we were to answer that off the cuff, 2020 was not what I expected it to be. And I think if, here we are almost a year later, and, it's funny, over Christmas talking to people, it's like, this time last year, we were talking about a Chinese flu.
Yep.
And that grew into something, it's like 2020 crept along and you were waiting for it to come out of it, but they didn't think that this pandemic would actually last as long as it did.
Yep.
And as a result of it, we spent a lot of time sort of aiming without shooting, so to speak. And here we are now at the beginning of 2021, and a lot of work was done trying to get ready to restart the aviation industry. But there's a lot of missed opportunities in terms of the time over the last 8 months. We could have been in a better position to start with. That's no fault of the industry, and a lot of it rests with government policies and governments not putting the attention towards this because public policy was more important. But
Yep.
Still, there is some opportunities that I think if I had enough time back, we would have pressed harder on to be ready to go in a better position starting the new year than we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And under normal circumstances, we'd be able to say, right, this is what we've learned now, and this is what we're going to do. But as you said there, public opinion and trying to balance the finances with the safety and security of people. I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, whether you're part of a regulatory or a representative body or a government. So I think everybody needs to appreciate that. But I also feel that sometimes when you dither about making a decision or being transparent about what will happen, if certain data comes to the fore, that's also not a good thing. And especially now, even just here in the UK, I mean, for children to have gone to school for one day and then they've been told, people knew that this was coming weeks ago. So I think, in some cases, it's far better to be very clear and direct and say, look, if this doesn't happen or people don't follow these guidelines, this is what has to be done. So everybody knows that it's going to come.
Yeah, there's a fine line though between accepting these hard specifications driven by government in a democratic society, and there's always that fringe that believe that this is infringing on our rights and everything else, and so there's a very fine line between governments dictating what needs to happen versus trying to find a softer approach to it. I would be rather have a heavy hand would be my wish. I think ironically, when you step back and you think now people were criticizing Australia for their approach to the pandemic, and now all of a sudden they all wish they were Australia.
Yep.
And so I think it's again a benefit of hindsight in terms of how you wish we could have managed this better.
Yeah, yeah. And I wrote something down earlier as to if I was to ask you about the logical baseball bat or the fluffy tickler, where would you be? And I think you've just answered it. You'd be more towards the baseball bat, which I definitely am. And I just think, it's far better to be tougher, quicker, learn faster, and then move on.
Yeah, yeah. And, specifically for our industry, we thrive in that. You could look back in history and think of every time something went bump in the night in this industry, the Band-Aid was tore off right away. 9/11 would be one of the more recent ones.
Yeah.
We didn't, we pick up and learn quickly, and we can do the same now. It's just a question of when the governments are ready to allow us to do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. And on that note, Nick, I think one of the positives, and I know it's a word that everybody says, oh my God, here we go again, but it says about collaboration and communication. But the representative bodies and the regulatory bodies, they did come together and they dished out some very quick directives, guidelines, policies, safeguards, and made it very easy for things to happen very quickly, like you said. And none such than, having exceptions for frontline workers and the aviation business with crews and landing and quarantines and all sorts, because at the end of the day, the supply chain has got to continue.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest piece from the cargo standpoint.
Yeah,
it was there was a quick realization that if they don't get this thing right, then we're really going to have a significant issue in terms of the overall supply chain. And one thing that actually was interesting during the very beginning of all this stuff in terms of lockdown was the reach out from the maritime community that also relies heavily on the aviation sector to move their workers around.
Yep.
And there's some seriously horrific stories in terms of crew people being on board for months on end with no way to return to home. And then, when you start to look at it, it wasn't just the aviation supply chain that was at risk. It was the entire supply chain that was at risk. And that was a big motivator for governments to move quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So now with all of these learnings and with your portfolio of responsibility, so airports, passenger, cargo, security, ground handling, obviously for the IATA member airlines, training and consultancy, and now a new one, the IATA Restart. So, I mean, my goodness me, my friend, you're looking well under the pressures that must be on your shoulders with regards to that list of responsibilities.
Yes, and you know what? I haven't given up drinking, but I had give up smoking, and I'm counting the days. I'm day 110 without one. Yeah. So I managed to do all of that without going back to those dreaded things. But yeah, you know what? It's an honor actually to be in the middle of it all. Because if you asked me back when I started in this business in the early 90s as a crew scheduler and an entry-level job in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and you'd ask me then that I would be in a position that I'm in today, I'd laugh my head off, because at that time I was a bartender learning the airline industry, and now I'm still a bartender, but I'm in the middle of the airline industry.
No, but it's good. But like knowing you as I do, I think it's in safe hands, Nick, and that's one thing I've always respected. It's always been a pleasure listening to you, watching what you're doing, how you do it, the way you say it, and giving people the reasons why certain things are important, and not being afraid to make a tough decision or to say it as it is. And I think that is something that everybody wants to see more of.
Yeah, there's a significant opportunity for it. It's difficult. I think the industry's not shy of making decisions. It's really, in our case, especially now more than ever, our future is in the hands of the politicians.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately, it's not in the hand of the regulators. And, we're not even dealing with the normal regulators. I mean, we're a heavily overly regulated industry as it is, and as it was. Now we're regulated not only by the normal constituencies, but also the public health authorities at the same time, and being managed by politics.
Yeah.
And, I give you a very classic example of how politics is managing a lot of them. And I'll pick on the country that I'm living in today in terms of Canada. Within the next 6 hours, there will be a mandate that will go out that in order for you to return to Canada, you will need to have had a positive PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival. And one would say, okay, well, that's okay, because we've been pushing for testing for quite some time. We have been, but you don't make those decisions within 3 days when people are in mid-trip.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the reason for it is because right now in Canada, like the UK and other countries, we're on a quasi lockdown.
Yeah.
And what happened was during this period of time and people not being able to celebrate Christmas with their families and not being able to enjoy the normal trappings of life, they find out that politicians are on the beaches in the Caribbean. So flight shaming becomes an issue. And now all of a sudden the public policy is mandated on the industry that makes sense, but needs to have time to be implemented. And that's the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in. We're being over-regulated and we're being managed politically. And those things are going to have to change before we start to see any light at the end of the tunnel for us in 2021. We do see the light, but we're going to see some horrific incidents before we get there, I think.
Yeah, but it is crazy, isn't it? Because there's not many scenarios or situations that you can't foresee if you've got the right data. So if something crosses a red line threshold, you say, right, if it crosses this, you're going to be given a week's notice. Everybody's going to be in lockdown. Yep. Schools, whatever. And it should be as simple as that. But the surprise, almost like knee-jerk responses to something that Joe Public is expecting, just makes everybody frustrated, annoyed, and wondering what's going on.
That's it. And the unintended consequences of these things are not on the minds of politicians who are only focused on appeasing the electorate and getting reelected. And so, and going back to your earlier point, decisions can be made. This isn't rocket science, but there's also having the leadership and the ability to make those decisions. Using that example again in terms of Canada, a PCR test, which is difficult to get to begin with, and also we shouldn't be overburdening the healthcare system when these tests should be given for other reasons at the moment.
Yep.
That in itself is a major problem, and then it's followed by a 14-day quarantine. So for all intents and purposes, the policy has closed the border. So why not grow a set of nuts and close the border?
Yeah.
But that's the problem. They're afraid to make a decision and stand by it.
Yeah.
Airlines would be better off dealing with that than dealing with a scenario where you're going to have thousands of people stuck in transit with inability to get a test and a lack of understanding with respect to how they can get home.
Yep. And also passing that final or that not last mile, but that last few yards responsibility onto somebody else, instead of taking clear ownership of the situation and doing it for the good of today. And like you said earlier, not for the tenure of their position.
That's it. That is the $1 million puzzle there. I mean, and that's what we need to see more of. But I don't know. Some countries and jurisdictions have been a little bit more definitive than others, and then it can be we were critical of them, but at least they made a decision. I mean, Hong Kong would be a good example of that, where we kind of criticized them earlier on when they called it a fourth wave. And said, Jesus, we're only in second wave. We have 4 more to go. Yeah. But in a jurisdiction of the population that they had with 40 cases and closing their borders again to control this thing, you start to wonder, okay, well, that's a bit over the top, but maybe it isn't. At least it's definitive.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that's something now that will come. Another positive, though, out of the last 10 months or so is the way people have risen to the challenge. Yeah. They've proven how agile and resilient they are, but it's also given a clear indication of another decision that people should be allowing almost nature to take its course, which is if a business or an organization was bad before this pandemic, they're not going to get better during it or straight after it. So in some cases, it's far better to let the dead wood go and start to clean out and review and then address the business from a different perspective. Yeah,
that's like never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
I mean, the collaboration, I mean, I can speak personally for IATA, and I've been here in my 5th year now, and I'm still learning the place. And I spent my first 2 years thinking everybody in this organization got paid by the word. what I have seen in this organization over the course of the last number of months, 10 months or so, is a real recognition and a real stepping up, and a lack of organizational structure getting in the way of working together. So that for us. I mean, specifically for us, I think that will pay dividends for years to come now, because there's no excuse for it. And to your point again, there's a lot of people that lost their work jobs over the course of this pandemic. And while it's unfortunate, it does provide an opportunity for retrenching and refocusing and collaboration, and really focusing only on the most important things, because you don't have time for the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Now, with this new task that you've got, this new responsibility for the IATA restart, one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people about, and it's something that I genuinely care, when you see people that you've known, you've spent a lot of time with, whether it's socially or business or whatever, and you see the way they're affected as a result of being displaced from a career that they love, a job that they love, and through no fault of their own, and the impact it's having on them as individuals with their own self-respect, their own pressures, and also the families. It's a terrible thing, Nick. So one of the things that I've been pushing for, and hopefully some people have started to do, is how do you look after some of these people who've been displaced for that interim period before we welcome them back? And like anybody who's been laid off, or anybody who's not doing the job that they thought they were doing, keeping them on or in touch with what's happening, keeping their licenses renewed, keeping them involved in training, that's so important. So do you think there's an opportunity for the industry now, maybe even as part of the reboot, that people who are genuinely displaced, who both they and the company would like to see joining back again, would be able to be given access to certain training to keep themselves occupied, to keep keeping their finger on the button and knowing what's going on, and even having a different type of a training program that they could latch onto, where industry experts were telling them what was going on, what they needed to be aware of, how the dynamics of leadership and regulatory and licensing, etc., was happening.
Yeah, I think we've started in that direction, and I know I'm going to speaking specifically for our team in terms of training. There was some product launches for displaced in-flight people just within the last month. It was directed towards them to provide an opportunity to retrain in different areas within the aviation sector as well. So that was recently launched. It's one example, but we could and should be doing more. Because I think what we're missing in all of this, and let's head down, not looking too far across the horizon, is that when we talk about all these displaced people, one thing that you and I've had conversations before about is the fact that, while you and I like to think we're young, we aren't. And there were people in this business that were older than us that were still working.
Yeah.
A significant portion.
Yeah.
Well, they're displaced, but a lot of these people are displaced and aren't coming back. So I think for the people that are sitting and waiting to come back, for sure it's going to happen. For sure it's going to happen. I think what else is going to happen is we're going to have an extreme shortage as a result of it as well.
Yeah.
Because those people that are 60 plus that are saying, you know what, I had enough. I did my time. I needed this kick in the arse to get out. And now I'm out. And then so when airlines are going to try to backfill these positions, which was an issue before, it's going to become even a bigger one. So not only providing people opportunity to train now, but actually looking for opportunities to train people for when we're ready to start is something that we need to wrap our heads around, I believe.
Exactly, and a different type of training. But one of the things you've touched on there is the fact that when people leave an industry, there's an awful lot of people that have got a degree of bitterness or regret, because when they leave, it's almost like the day they say they were going to leave, or when they're told they're going to leave, that's it. They're gone. Now, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people have got a genuine desire to pass on their experience to those coming through. And if that bridge whereby you've got youngsters who, because of the internet and mobiles, think they can access any problem through, just having a search. And then you've got the older ones who think maybe that they were better than they actually are. Who knows? But if you can just bring that together and have one being proud to help the next one coming up, and the younger ones feeling that they're getting the benefit of that experience so that they've got a better judgment moving forward. I mean, that would be an ideal positive framework to also bring in, to this reboot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that naturally tendencies for our trainers and even auditors, because auditors serve a similar type of function, tend to be the more tenured people.
Yeah.
So, but is there more of an opportunity for it? Absolutely. And even from an interim standpoint, where you're bringing people back into organizations for a shorter period of time on a contractual basis versus in the way it would have been done historically. But the way you outlined learning is the way it always was. I mean, especially if you take the ramp, where you and I are overly familiar with, perhaps versus other areas. I mean, if you did not learn from the tenured folks and the leads, then you weren't learning. Yep. You did not learn it in the classroom. Yep. You learned it from the lead on the flight that made sure that you didn't make mistakes, and you understood the importance of why you needed to do the task the way it was outlined. And then, there is a significant opportunity for us to pull in. The fact is that there's no real central system for something like that today. And there's a lot of organizations that are offering training. I guess the question would be, are they offering the right training?
Exactly. And not just flooding the market with training and making people feel insecure that if they don't do training, they're not going to get a chance to come back, etc. I think it needs to have a review in a different way. Now, something that we'd probably have a bit more fun if I asked you the question in a bar and after the 9 o'clock the watershed, so that we could really say what we thought. But Frank Slootman, the CEO of Snowflake, he says he always asks people one question, and that makes him then think whether or not they're the right people. And he asked them, if you couldn't do anything this year except for one thing and one thing only, and you couldn't do anything else, what would that one thing be?
Get pregnant. No. That's, you said after.
If you were able to get pregnant, Nick, I'd be your agent, mate. We'd be multi-millionaires overnight.
I wouldn't be talking to you either.
Oh,
I wouldn't need to. One thing only: removal of quarantines.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, is the biggest barrier to resumption of passenger traffic. The fear of quarantines is arguably the biggest hindrance to people starting to get back on airplanes. People aren't daunted by getting a test. I don't people aren't daunted by being vaccinated. I mean, some will choose not to. Yep. That's fine, and it still remains to be seen whether that's going to be a requirement for future travel. But the fear of having to be quarantined or quarantined on the return just stands in the way of traffic resuming. And for me, if we saw that lifted, we would see, the resumption of traffic would be faster. And we've seen examples of that. And I only say that because we have been studying that and saw what that looked like. The Canary Islands was the first one as an example.
Oh my God, yeah.
The floodgates were open. UAE, Dubai, UK, same thing happened. And so that, to me, would be the first thing that came to my mind. I mean, there are obviously many things, but that would be number one, I think.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And it's that consumer confidence that's necessary. Now, I did a digital event with Private Aviation, and obviously they've managed. I mean, this is a great period for them, but it's also a necessary period. And although people shirk and shrug and say, it's only for the wealthy, I've yet to find a poor man who offers another man a job. So we need success in all parts of the business because it supplies jobs and it's all part of the whole package. But when you look at the some of the statistics, like the touch points between legacy carrier activity and private aviation. So it's at 30 to 50 on private, and anything around the 500 mark on legacy. That's one of the areas that I feel airports, they need to be better at promoting what they're actually doing, but promoting the same message. So not like after the security blips, where you've got, you land in one airport and you're told take your shoes off and your laptop out. You get to the next one and it's okay, no, you can leave your laptop in, sir, but you've got to take your shoes off. And there's so many differences, but it's not explained to people well enough. And I think that frustration, that's also causing a little bit of frustration and nerves with having people having the confidence to get back and fly again.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is interoperability, harmonization, and standardization. I mean, those are the business buzzwords of 2021. Because if we don't, and you know what, I mean, you have to be pragmatic about it. If we think that's going to happen at the beginning, then we're wrong, because it's just not going to unfold that way. If ICAO was more of a regulator than it is a suggestion box, we would probably get there too. And I don't mean that as a derogatory reference to ICAO, but they're limited in their ability to be able to enforce a standard way of approaching things. And we've seen that. Although we've seen some success on that too, in terms of, by and large, the biosafety measures on board aircraft are pretty consistent.
Yeah.
So we can do it. It just takes some time. Having that information readily available to the customers right from the start, from the time of booking to the time of curbside to get in the cab or get in your drive. That there's a lot of work required between now and then before we get there. Landing on what that will look like with governments is the biggest piece. The latest iteration from ICAO CART Part 2 starts to outline that, but not to the degree it needs to be. And recently we announced the IATA Travel Pass, which was intended to do just that. Utilizing the thematic as the brain that people are used to using in terms of your visa requirements and passport requirements, then why not for your health requirements as well?
Exactly.
And so that will play a part in the next coming months as to how orderly this restart will be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And obviously cargo is going to go through a purple patch because of demand and because of the pressures. So we won't cover that. But regarding most people's opinions about recovery, I mean, please God, I hope that from Q2 there'll be a lot of positive surprises.
I think so too. I think once we get past this big wave, and we're all going to take a bit of pain personally, for sure. Things that none of us like doing, but on the other side of that will be an opportunity to be able to get ready for a more meaningful restart. I think we're projecting by June of this year, you'll start to see what the beginnings of a summer that we're sort of used to. Definitely not to the degree. Some economics forecasting are saying we won't get back to our levels now, 2019 levels till 2026. But you know what? Again, not to disparage economists, but if economists could predict the future, then they wouldn't be spending an inordinate amount of time talking about what it would look like and then adjusting the numbers as they go along. I think it will come back a lot faster than that. And I think there's a huge amount of pent up demand as we've seen when markets do reopen. And I think you're right, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen fast, and we're going to see it in the next few months. And that's what we need to be prepared for. And that's what the industry needs to be prepared for.
Yeah. And part of that reboot and that re-preparation and capability, that's a phenomenal challenge. And if you liken it to the rollout of the vaccines, firstly, people were skeptical about the vaccines. Were they being passed and cleared too quickly? Then it's about the logistics, and they were saying that the logistics arm wouldn't be available to do it. Now it's coming down to files and people who've got the numbers of people who don't get fatigued with the amount of vaccinations that have to be done. So there's always these things, but it's a great opportunity now to start preparing.
Yeah, human nature is always great at identifying the challenges. And not so great at identifying the opportunities and successes along the way. So there's never a shortage of a challenge, but I mean, knowing what you have to face is is a huge advantage, and focusing on those things and not getting bogged down with them. Yeah, they're challenges, but they're not insurmountable. And I think the vaccine example that you gave is a great one. I mean, you know, you harken back to 3 months ago, and we're talking about the logistical challenges that this will be. And lo and behold, you know, we're not seeing those, at least from an aviation standpoint, manifest itself. But there's a lot of work that went behind making sure that was the case.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, and even, you know, even the surveys that were done, you know, they showed how quickly the industry was able to respond and get itself into a position where everybody felt more confident about the process.
yeah, there's a lot of things we should be proud of. Like,
Yeah. And it's also something that I'm sure many of your team will look back on and they say, yeah, we told you, CEIV, because there was a lot of skeptics around with regard to the money-making principles there. But at the end of the day, you know, it took the GDP criteria and it put it into a specialized area. And now those that did it, they've done well.
Yeah, because I mean, just setting yourself against a benchmark that the industry have all come together to create. It's logical, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, and hopefully, please God, another one of the initiatives, you know, whereby from shippers that they take more of a responsibility and an influence of upstream selection of service providers based on a qualified capability matrix.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, you know, from facilities to training to all those things that are put to one side when it comes to an RFP, and then you just get, you know, a multitude of sins incorporated in an SLA to cover one's backside. That's the wrong way now moving forward.
Yeah, gee, if they could only do that just with one thing and one thing only, safety would be a good start. And you know, I don't know, we could spend a full session on the requirements there, but you're right, end to end accountability. And we're getting there, but I mean, you know, we talk about cargo. We haven't talked about cargo much. I think in this particular sessions, I know you spend a lot of time speaking about cargo, but you know, there's still a lot of opportunity in cargo. And we talk about cargo's place right now and how important it is, and absolutely, it's always been important. Now more than ever, because it's the only source of revenue for most airlines.
Yeah.
And we talk about, you know, now cargo, but cargo hasn't changed any. It's just supply and demand.
Yep.
We still have a lot of work to do in terms of digitization of cargo, managing the supply chain from the end to end, you know, and in multimodal on top of that.
Yep.
Because we've got one piece of cargo on an aircraft that doesn't end up in a truck somewhere.
Yep, exactly.
And so there's significant opportunity for us to continue to take to push us into the direction it needs to be. So we'll never work ourselves out of a job at this.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. And going back to that closing plenary at the World Cargo Symposium, David Ambridge, you know, I always, every time I see him, one of the things that we always have a laugh about is when we first started getting involved in committees and supporting IATA and everything, we used to say, good God, we've got to get rid of all this paperwork. Yeah. But Nick, surely now, talking about cargo, the catalyst now with the sanitization and hygiene, we've got to stop all this paperwork and airway bills.
Yeah, it is the reluctance to move forward on this is confounding, is the best word. For the business case is obvious. There seems to be a legitimate willingness to do so, but I can't quite put my finger on what's stopping it. And I think it probably, if you were to go back to draw a parallel between the passenger side of the business and the cargo side of the business, it really boils down to a mandate, a date. This is the date.
Yeah.
And that's it. And everybody has to do it.
Yeah. And I always used to think to myself, and for those who know me, I've always believed in just in time. Do you know what I mean? I'm always probably the last one going through, the last one checking in, the last one getting to the gate, the last one getting on the aircraft. But I always thought, no, don't worry, even if I'm rushing it, I can always convince somebody to let me through and get there. But as soon as they started doing with the paperless, and then they said, well, I'm very sorry, sir, but as soon as we've got this, it goes straight in and they won't let you go through security. Well, that would be ideal in cargo for ready for carriage and, you know, cargo turning up late and disrupting loads and all those sort of issues. Yeah. But I cannot understand why there isn't a mandate. And if it's the hygiene issue that is the catalyst, as I said, Why not make it and say, look, from such and such a date, no more paperwork. And that would also give an opportunity to start looking at realistic rating and financial indicators that are on the airway bill as well, and what's the true values, instead of things that are referred to in a book that doesn't really exist, because that confuses everybody. It's madness.
Yeah. Some of that's by design, though, as you know.
Yeah, of course. Nick, most of the things that are still in place aren't done because somebody doesn't want to change them. It's because most people don't want to change them for whatever reasons. But for the good of all, it has to come to an end somewhere.
Yeah, and it's going to take some leadership for the industry to force itself in this direction, like it did with the passenger business so many years ago. And I think, you know, with the advent of a new leader in our cargo world coming in the next month or two, that will be squarely a significant agenda item for that successful individual, because that is by and large the biggest area of opportunity in the cargo world, for sure.
Yeah, so it's amazing, isn't it, how Ireland is going to have such a big impact now on the rest of the world's aviation, eh?
Yeah.
So there's only my granddad always used to say, there's only two types of people in this world: those that are and those that wish they were.
That's it. Yeah.
So I think
once a year to be on.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Willie's got the opportunity to have a big impact.
And you know what, you can tell he's well, anyone that's had an opportunity to interface at all with Willie, or even taking the time to see him speak, you can't underestimate that passion.
Yeah.
And that desire to succeed and win. Who doesn't want to play on a team with someone like that?
Exactly.
And, he's going in with an industry hat on. I can't wait, because I think there's a lot of things that we all need to learn. And I mean, I'm full of piss and vinegar too. And it's something that took me a little while to understand, that sometimes some things you take a hammer to, and some things you do have to take a soft brush to. And that will be learned over time. But I'm really looking forward to having somebody in charge for this organization, this industry, that wants to make change and make it now.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, this thing with society and stuff about, it's okay, you know, giving people a certificate for participating, or giving them a, you know, oh, don't worry, you know, everybody can't win. But everybody does want to win. And there's nothing more satisfying than winning as part of a winning team.
Yeah. And there's a right way to win too.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think it's going to do wonders for, and there's nothing against the previous leadership, because everybody comes into organizations at a specific time. I believe
exactly.
And you're there for a period of time for a purpose.
Yep.
And when it's ready for something else, no, we don't all have the same personality.
Yep.
So, you know, and Willie's time will come too, when that's not required anymore. But right now, in a crisis, it's a perfect style of leadership, I think, and we're going to see that come through in spades as the course of this year unfolds.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like an analogy with the military. So, you know, when something's going wrong, you need to send the commandos, and, you know, you need to send all the rough and tough lads in first, then you send the engineers in, then the communicators, then the politicians, and it just goes in cycles. And at any given time, your fit is more accustomed to what's necessary than others, but it doesn't mean that they're right or wrong.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Now, there's also so many experts in this industry now. And at the end of the day, you can't really be an expert, because nobody's ever lived or gone through this. So those that have made mistakes in the past, I think, you know, there's going to be an awful lot of experts in the next 5 to 10 years who are going to learn so much from this period that we're going through now. Now, many of the people are saying, like you said, that it's going to be, the optimists are saying 2 to 3 years. The pessimists are saying 4 to never, getting back to the 2019 levels, especially with business travel. And even Bill Gates saying, you know, it's going to be 50% business travel that will be lost, and how things are changing. One of the things that I'm starting to see a little bit is a lot of the interface with Zoom and you know, Microsoft Teams and everything. That's great, and it can be done. But there will be, as soon as there's an opportunity to get in front of people and make things happen, that will open up a little bit. But I do think that the model and the way people are going to do things is going to change. So even on the leisure side, lots of the people that I know now, especially who've got accommodation abroad or people who want to get to the coast, they're now booking up for a month instead of 2 weeks. They're now they now want to recharge with their emotional energies, and they want those batteries to be full up again. So the actual habits are going to change as well. And I think as soon as that light starts to go on and stay on at the end of the tunnel, people are going to jump at every opportunity whatsoever to experience life, to share times with their loved ones, to do crazy things they've never done before, but always with one eye a little bit wary about what if. So making the time count. And I think that's going to be great for the passenger business, but I'm not sure how the business and the first class models are going to be in the future, like with lounges and everything else that people will possibly be a little bit reluctant to get back into.
Yeah, that's, I mean, Bill Gates. Bill Gates makes a lot of predictions. With, the only thing he's been able to do is force us to upgrade our software because they control the market in terms of Microsoft. So, and he's also very happy to get on his own private jet and go wherever he wants. So I have a tendency to take what somebody says that lives in a world that none of us could ever fathom with a grain of salt. I also don't think that anyone can predict the future. And I think what he underestimates is that people that are 3 or 4 rungs down his organization are chomping at the bit to get on an airplane, because let's face it, who doesn't like a hotel? Who doesn't like going to conferences? Who doesn't like getting on an airplane? Who doesn't like sitting in that seat up in front? I think, yeah, there is going to be a change perhaps at the beginning in terms of pricing models. But the experience itself, I don't think there's going to be a shortage of people who still want to sit in the front of the bus.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not so sure I'm as skeptical as some of these business leaders that suggest that, we're going to all go digital and not want to experience life again. I'm more on your side. I think what we don't understand is how will that be? We've been talking about millennials for a long time as being the experience generation.
Yeah.
They haven't gone anywhere. In fact, we made it worse. So someone could look at it differently to say, we have a group of people who don't want to own things and just want to experience stuff that we just taken 2 years from them. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And so and maybe there's not the people that are sitting up in front of the business class cabin, but they could be. Yeah. And if it's priced right, anybody could have access to it. I think I'm not so as pessimistic as some others, but in terms of return of business travel. But let's face it, we've seen these ups and downs in our past before. Aircraft can be densified, the bulkhead can be moved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I still think we're going to have full airplanes.
Yeah. And what about, oh no, we're definitely going to have full airplanes, but also with the fact that so many of them have been retired and taken out of service. So the capacity is a little bit different again. Hopefully now some common sense and logic pricing will be in place, which will also affect the whole business from a margin perspective, which is long overdue. But do you think now you're going to get a lot more collaboration within alliances and route sharing and longer point to points? Do you think it's going to displace the old hub concept a little bit to start with? LCCs with their point to points, they're going to be earlier in the recovery ladder. Yeah,
I think that that was happening anyway. I mean, the longer range aircraft, there's no surprise with that. So that's been taking place as it is, and more alliances or code sharing. I think that will be done out of a necessity.
Yeah.
What we would also remain to be seen is, what government's actions will be in terms of slot allocations and management of that. Are they going to be protective? And maybe that's not the right word, but making sure that the home carriers have a leg up. So that means, in some ways, that could be limiting competition. That may unfold, which may mean that code sharing would be an even more of a requirement. Ironically, I think because of the price of leasing of an aircraft right now, and the price of fuel being where it is today, there's never been a better time in the history of aviation to start an airline.
Yep.
So who knows what that may look like. And of course, those with the better cost structures, whether that's an LCC, which I think is an overused term now, as you see LCCs with mixed cabins and
Yeah.
etc. But for sure, I would suggest that more the ones with the better cost structure are definitely going to have a leg up on everybody else when we come out of this.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. Selective share buying, I think, is a good little exercise now for the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Now, sustainability. Okay, so obviously in the reboot and reconsideration, and as soon as people say, sustainability, they're all thinking of the carbon footprint and the negative impact on the world, etc. But I said to you last time we spoke, for me, there's a 3P concept to sustainability, which is planet, people, and profit. And you can't just focus on the planet, you can't just focus on the people, and you can't just focus on the profit, because they all have got an impact on each other. So even if you look at some of the airports, and people saying that they'd be willing to transfer or change their GSE and their fleets over to electric, you don't have the capacity for the electricity to come into the airport. And if you do, there's a huge cost there. So airports and the way they become their own sort of ecosystem and their own sort of generator of marketing for that particular airport, there's a lot more that I think is going to go into the dynamics of what they focus on in the future to attract airlines and different types of business, rather than just having tenants on their sites. So they're going to have to look at, the logistics, the infrastructure, backup, emergency responses, what sort of capabilities they've got, etc. They're going to have to really, or they should be really looking now at bringing that community together and doing things differently and making plans accordingly.
Yeah, then that's a long-lasting problem in our business, and really is that the whole investment in the airport infrastructure that is not always in alignment with the tenants.
Yeah.
And you always get into that infinite debate about who gets the benefit and who pays for it in the end.
Yep.
And that has to change. For sure, that has to change. Sustainability will probably be the catalyst for that, because not only, sustainable aviation fuels is also a huge opportunity in front of us that requires airports, airlines, governments, and others to be, and service providers, in particular the fuel service providers, to get on board with that. And like you said, the ground operations opportunities, the automation that could potentially take place there that has exponential benefits beyond just sustainability. But you're right. And how is there any examples out there today of any of them that really get that? Probably not, other than the ones that are dominated by an individual carrier. So it's sort of their airport anyway.
Exactly.
A problem with that is it's often done to the advantage of that one independent dominant airline than it is to the airline community itself. Which is something that we need to address. There's no real cut and dry answers yet, but I think sustainability would probably be the one that draws everybody together with a common goal, for the simple fact that we're all measuring ourselves on it.
No, I agree. And is it not, Nick, an opportunity now for almost like for airports to start introducing a level of standards and criteria and code of conduct for all their tenants, to make sure that there's an opportunity for decent margins? There's a greater focus from procurement on safety and quality than there is on final costing. And, to have a section of their community fighting almost, a race to the bottom with pricing, that isn't doing anybody any good. So, there's a chance now, surely, to realign and reevaluate and then gauge what is the best way forward for an airport community to operate.
Yeah, it's difficult though with all the various operational models for airports. So, some are for profit, some are not for profit. It's going to be difficult to get a full consistent approach to how an airline and airport interface with each other. But out of necessity now, the fact that, we're all in the same boat, right? The airports are just as desperate as the airlines are. So that is the opportunity that presents itself that wasn't there before, where a lot of times airports are flush with, that as good as anyone. Ironically, the entire industry is underpinned by airplanes and people, yet they were the ones that were making the least amount of money in the process. But at least now none of us are making any money, so we're starting from a level playing field. So
Yeah.
it should be an opportunity to reset.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also to look at different things like, like pooling, not just of ULDs, etc., but of equipment, of support staff, to make things a lot more efficient and productive at airports as well, and keep people in jobs longer as part of their sustainability promise.
It's leadership. It's being able to illustrate why pooling would make sense, and that's often been the challenge. It's I know I've been on the other side of that, in charge of airports for an airline, and being asked to support pooling, and this is no, not on your life, and reason being that I have to protect the operation. And
Yeah.
last thing I want is to take a big delay because we were waiting for a pushback tractor that happened to be used by somebody else.
Yeah.
Or ground power unit. Well, it doesn't matter what it is. So it really boils down to being able to illustrate the benefits of that. And I think that can be done, but we don't have a good track record in the past of being able to do that. Tracking bags is the best example of that.
Yeah.
We're still not doing it, which is criminal in my mind, but we aren't doing it because we can't get everybody together to understand why we should be doing it as a community and the benefits of it, and ultimately for the customer in the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's going to be a lot of these opportunities, but it's really going to boil down to, I think what we're going to see is it has to be someone leading the cost benefit analysis and actually illustrating why we should all be standing up for this and doing it. And that, part of that role is with us, part of that role is with ACI, and part of that role is actually finding willing airlines and airports that want to do this and illustrate to the rest of the world how it works and why you should be doing it too.
Yeah, and also including the consumer and the customer, because they've got a great voice, and if they're educated and they make demands, or that's how they make their choices and their selection of who they go to for the services or whatever, that's going to be the biggest influence.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, back to the baseball bat and the feather duster.
That's it. Yeah, tear the Band-Aid off.
That's it. Now, as far as autonomous equipment and vehicles, and now you look at some of the issues that have been happening, and people, worried about their own self-welfare, hygiene, etc. I mean, how long do you think it's going to be before there's going to be autonomous aircraft or sky taxis and around certain cities? And how long do you think that's going to be?
Well, I think this COVID set that back a fair bit at the moment. I think when you look at some of the more Jetson-like cities, Dubai would be the one that probably, and Jetson's obviously dating myself, but Dubai, I mean, they were well down the path of this, and this is coming, and it has its place. As far as autonomous aircraft, I don't see that, not in our lifetime, probably. We may see single cockpit type operations sometime in our lifetime, although I'm sure any pilots listening to this would not be.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that from a want to reduce the amount of pilots in the world, but I just think that over time, that's probably going to happen. Full autonomous. I'm not so certain that anybody's ready for that yet. But who knows? I mean, things can happen fast. The technology's there, that's for sure. It's a question of the acceptability of our consumers. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
We're not even in autonomous cars yet, right? So I think once that becomes more of a prevalent thing in our society, the acceptance of human beings to start seeing it with transport trucks on the roads, and then eventually gravitating into something that seems to be a little bit more far-fetched in terms of aircraft would be the cadence. But what do I know, right?
No. That's brilliant. Now, what definitely will be on the agenda, and I'm sure you've got lots of staff forwards and tools in place, but digitization and data sharing. So that has to be part of the reboot now, and the openness for data sharing, because at the end of the day, it's the new gold, the new oil. It's the new Bitcoin, if you will, but it's something that people need to be confident in sharing and accepting it, and then working off of that data-driven decision making.
Yeah, and that's been a long time coming, and we're better at it than we often admit. I mean, especially when it comes to operational management, aircraft movements,
Yeah.
ACDM, And if you sit in any advanced system operations control or operation control center now, you probably ask one of these guys about digitization, they think we were on crack, because everything they do is digitized. And you're talking about a guy who started where crew scheduling was a piece of paper, a ruler, a red pen, and a pencil. And so we've come a long way in that period of time in terms of digitizing. There's always further room for advancement. But, when you get into data sharing, that's where everybody's curlies start to roll up, because, the consumer gets in the way, and we've created an entire legal industry on GDPR. I mean, you can't do anything without get a legal opinion now on whether or not it's going to, circumvent somebody's rights. But again, another hammer versus a feather. Consumers have a choice. And if you could offer a choice where data sharing provided you with a better experience, and you wanted to and could put your hand up, then you can. And if you don't, then you don't. And there's nothing wrong with two separate processes, but the person who decides to share gets the benefit of it. And, and instead of us believing that we want to make the answers for the consumer themselves, when every survey we do every year, which is interesting, our global passenger survey, when we talk about digitization and sharing of information, it's always over 70% of the consumers say, if it's going to make the process better, I'm in. But yet we have governments, and we twist ourselves into contortions saying that we listen to the fringe saying that that's an infringement of our rights, when really the majority of the people are prepared to share as it is.
Yeah. But it's the only way forward, Nick.
Yeah, not only that, but also for our industry to share. And that's something that we're not the best at. We're pretty reluctant. Safety data is a good example of that. We could be so much better in this area. We're good. I mean, we're the safest mode of transportation for a reason. And that primarily for our ability to follow standard operating procedures and have standards. But we could be so much better in terms of predictive analytics. And if we were more open to sharing of information as an industry, and that's something that is squarely on the agenda, and I think people are beginning to realize that now. Yeah,
no, 100%, and the sooner the better, I think, because everybody will start to appreciate it. Because even now, and what you said there about certain parts of the industry are so advanced, and they're so accustomed to digitization and all sorts of artificial intelligence and algorithm-based decisions and everything, which is fantastic. And then you look at others and you think, my God, how can this be the same industry?
Yeah.
So as soon as the floodgates open and people can start to see how much better it is and how better the decisions are, because whether you're working in an airline or a handling agent or whatever, you look at some of the detail that they don't have because there is no sharing, and you think, my goodness me, this just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and there's no, I mean, some of it's limitations in terms of the data that's moving around. We're still using sometimes old technology. There is a lack of standards in terms of APIs. These things need to be worked on. They need to be prioritized. And we do have a new advisory council. Unfortunately, we missed a full year. We created a digital transformation advisory council a couple of years ago, and we haven't gotten the full benefit out of that. But the intention for that is to be able to identify and prioritize the areas where we could be better in terms of digitization and standards around sharing of information, open APIs. So there is a group tasked to look at this, but still we have a long way to go. I mean, we put iPads in people's hands, but they're still going around with teletype printers. So what? We say that we digitize the airway bill, but we actually put it on digital, and we're still printing it.
Yeah.
So in some ways we've made it worse, not better. And taking a step back and understanding that we often don't spend enough time on the front line either.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're all guilty of, and myself included. That I would love the opportunity, and if I was to make a plan for 2021, would be an opportunity to actually get back out and see where some of the real challenges are from the people who work in it, because we never do enough of that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Now that's a great segue into what we've spoken about before as well, about a new way of leadership training. Okay, so we know that there's going to be a lot of experienced people not going to come back into the industry. A lot of that experience is going to go away with them. There's a lot of people that are expected to take over the mantle, take over the baton, but they haven't been given the support. And they're also, some of them will be anxious. They won't know what's happening. They haven't got previous experience, etc. So I think there needs to be a different approach whereby you don't just focus on people that you want to be leaders and think that you can change them and all of a sudden they'll be accepted by everybody that they worked with before or that they're going to be responsible for, without doing obviously a smaller amount, but an equal awareness training to the rest of the colleagues to say, look, we all have to report to someone. We all have to answer to someone giving us directions or telling us what we need to do. So the sooner you can understand what is the best way to respond and interact and interface and support those people who have got that extra responsibility, the better everything will be. Because sometimes the more training you give to people as supposed leaders, you actually make a bigger gap between the leader as such and the workforce. And I think there needs to be a different approach, and also for people to understand now that it's a totally different culture and a different environment with all the pressures, the anxieties, human factors, you know, all those issues that people have got now, and they're still going to be worried for the next couple of years in case something else happens or in case it comes back again. So there's a totally different dynamic that's necessary there. So do you think there's also merit in, like we do with cars and where we're in certain areas, we have to have an MOT or a service check before you're allowed to carry on the road? And if somebody finds out that there's something wrong, whether it's a tire or your wipers or whatever, you have to get it done before you can actually drive the car away or have it on the highway again. Now, do you think with the gap and the problems that people have had to go through, that there should be a more disciplined, competency-based license or passport for people in key positions, and also for themselves to know that they're meeting the minimum requirements?
Like on the ramp, you mean, or in any?
Well, obviously, anywhere where it's a higher risk or a higher profile from safety and security, but just in general terms, because what we don't want, Nick, is we don't want to lose people from this industry, our industry, to other industries, because at the end of the day, you know, people get such good training, they get great practices, they develop good habits, and they're of great value to our industry. So to keep them, you also need to make them feel special and make them recognize that they've got a certain ability. Because I know for a fact, lots of people that were in the industry, lots of people I know now, they've gone into different industries and they've said, do you know something? I've had such a big impact in this particular company because of what I learned on the ramp, or because of what I learned in the warehouse, whether it be safety, security, just process compliance or whatever. And they're actually finding it easier to get into these, and they're opening the eyes of some of the management because they've got a different understanding and appreciation of consistency, timelines, you know, accuracy, and also all of those audit practices that everybody's aware of. So we want to keep good people. So in one way, if you have somebody and you keep telling them they're good, but they can't convince themselves they're good, there's a little bit of, you know, anxiety there. But if you're able to do it competency based, the reason I'm saying it is because there's so many companies I've seen that they have training programs and they're testing at the end of the training, you know, anybody could do. You wouldn't even have to attend the bloody course to pass the test at the end. But because it says in their manual that there must be competency testing, it's a tick box exercise. But to actually make people be responsible for the quality that they maintain during their career, and it comes to the old saying, you know, lots of people say, oh, I've got 25 years experience. Or is it they've got 1 year's experience they've survived for 25 years with?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We've got a great opportunity now. And when you're talking about reboot and we talk about professionals in our industry, this would be a way of actually certifying professionals based on the fact that they have to do certain things themselves, that then they get recognized. And it's also something that's on a database, because I've also been involved in lots of recruitment drives, and you see these people coming out with 30, 40, 50 certificates. And you think, good Jesus Christ, how do they get these certificates? And then they don't even know the first thing when you ask them a straightforward question. So do you know what I'm saying? I just think it's an opportunity now to make our industry one of the best there is, but to make it recognized as one of the best.
Yeah, there's a golden area of opportunity in here for sure. I mean, whether that is certification or licensing or regulating, I mean, something that we've been trying to avoid actually, and ironically, primarily because we don't believe the regulation is actually what's required. It really is culture change.
Yes.
It really is change. It really is a change of approach to accountability in operationally and safety, security sensitive positions. And we do a great. It's ironic that we do a great job of it in maintenance. We do a great job of it
Yep.
in we do a great job of it in flight operations. We don't do such a great job in the other areas, which is kind of ironic. They're kind of tend to treat it as sort of an attrition based area where you're just gonna, it's a puppy mill. You just keep training them and hope we hang on to a 30 or 40% that know how to do it right and teach the other ones. And let's just get them through that course and pass this test, and you're out on the ramp and away you go.
Yeah.
Can that improve? Yeah, absolutely is going to have to improve. And I think the jobs themselves are going to change too. I mean, back to your earlier point, automation is coming. It has to.
Yeah.
We can't continue to do things the way we did it. Autonomous is coming. It has to. And the benefits that would be extrapolated from that, not only from sustainable fuel, but from predictability of turnarounds, reduction in damage, and all those things that justify why it would make sense to do it. Less handoffs, more lean processes on the ramp. For sure, that's going to change. So yeah, is there an opportunity here? Big time. Have I given it a significant amount of thought? At this point, no. But I think that you're right in asking the question that we need to put more emphasis on what this should look like in the future. Because if we don't, we're going to miss a big opportunity. But we're also going to be forced down this road anyway because we're going in this direction in terms of all the things I'd mentioned, autonomous, sustainable automation and digitization that you suggested.
Yeah, and it gives the chance for people to realize now that they've got to take a little bit of responsibility for their own destiny. And you've got upskilling, new skilling, cross skilling. You've got to have a different accountability and reference to what you're capable of, and to enjoy that. Because there was a little exercise just before Christmas. A group of people, they made contact with me and another fella, and they were saying about how they're very scared about what's going to happen, and all of them, every single one of them said, we're only I won't say what position they were, but every single one of them said exactly the same thing, unprompted and not all together. And what we said to them was, look, hold on a second, let's now just write down all the things that you do in your job. Now let's relate it to those skills and those engaged capabilities that you've got, and you now start looking at yourself differently. Now, if you're given a little bit of support on how to present yourself, and you actually believe in that, you'll be able to walk into lots of jobs. And what we did was we went through an exercise with them, so we got them to describe everything that they do on their shifts. And Nick, some of the things that they were doing and taking responsibility for, and just assuming that because they've done it for so long, it's nothing special. It is special. And I just think that, we could turn our industry, because of all of the pressures on compliance and regulatory issues and safety and security and quality related programs, SPIs, KPIs, SLA, all of those things that everybody touches, but they don't realize they're involved in. We could make people so much more professional, more
accountable,
more professional,
more ownership. But going back to your collaboration piece, you also need unions and trade unions to be on side with this type of activity and work ethic too, because you're talking about expanding people's roles, opening up their minds a little bit more beyond what they traditionally view today. And it's not about protecting jobs; it's about enhancing the profession, and that is something that we have not done in the area we're talking about versus what's been done in the other three areas that comprise the main operational components of our business. And you're right. I mean, it also provides an opportunity for promotion, because most airlines that are most successful, a lot of the successful people running these airlines have come up from within.
Yeah.
Some, and I think anyone that listens to this call that have worked in an airline will know that sometimes the wrong person gets promoted because they're good at managing up versus being promoted for their skills and what they contribute to the organization. And so this is a way of also being able to address that. Now, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but I only to say that I completely agree that there's opportunity here that needs to be further explored.
Yeah, and even with unions, I think one of the facts of moving forward with autonomous, with automation, etc., is that you are going to need less people, but you're going to need more qualified professional people.
Yep.
And that then protects positions, because if you guarantee your professionalism, there's always going to be an opportunity for you. But if people are allowed to be diluted into just mediocrity, there isn't going to be a great future for it.
Yeah, there's industry parallels that we can look at, something we're also not the greatest at. I mean, if you look at the automobile sector and what automation has meant to them,
yeah,
that is an excellent parallel. I guess we could look at aircraft manufacturers for this, in the same way. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a significant amount of lesser jobs. It just means the jobs are different.
Yep. And personally, I think they'll be more enjoyable as well, more satisfying, and it'll change people's mindsets and then how they relate to other things that are going to come out of this last year and a half once we get over it.
Yeah. And any ramp guy out there saying, "Hey, find a way to get me out of that cargo hold in the Embraer."
Yeah. Before
walking around like this.
Yeah, exactly. Before I lose 4 inches. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, just before we finish, and I could go on talking to you for God knows how long, but before we finish, what do you think are the just a few of the real wishes, or your wish list, that you want to accomplish as part of this IATA restart?
Well, I mean, I think that I mentioned it earlier. The ultimate goal is the removal of border restrictions and quarantines, and that's number one. Having a harmonized approach to testing protocols would be significantly important as we move forward, and as well as vaccinations.
Yeah.
And that has to be properly coordinated and rolled out. And it can't be one or the other. It has to be both. You can't run into a scenario and try to avoid scenarios where we start to see countries not allowing people in unless you show a vaccination certificate. I mean, we can't go back that far, right? We have to make sure that there's protocols in place that allow for testing, protocols in place that allow for vaccinations. But we also believe that there's scenarios where you don't need any of it at all. Yeah. And that time will come as well. And so testing, vaccinations, removal of border restrictions, and the sharing of information through an automated process that allows for consumers to be able to do this without spending the majority of their travel prior trying to figure out what the Christ they're supposed to do. And while they're on vacation, what the Christ is supposed to do to return. That can't be the way we move forward. So, and that what I mentioned, the travel pass, but there are other products out there as well that can potentially facilitate that, not just what IATA is proposing. But we're definitely going to need to have a system like that in place as we move forward. And I think those are the big key components of that. And then the others are getting it out in front of the consumer so they understand, what's in place, how it works, what's expected of them, so that they know that we're ready to receive them, and that it's not going to be a total shit show like it is today.
Yeah, and just to finish, and just one question that lots of people have asked me as well is, I would suppose you don't favour, and you wouldn't like to think that it would be no vac, no fly, no vac, no show, no vac, no restaurant, no vac, no pub.
No, absolutely. I mean, for my own personal opinions, if someone tells me that I need a vaccination to go in a restaurant, well, they can go F themselves.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't, that's my own personal opinion in terms of our social life. But as far as, countries deciding that a vaccine is required before you arrive, I mean, we are not in support of that. That is not our position. I don't think will ever be our position. Because let's face it, you're cutting off a large proportion of the world if you do that. And that is the wrong approach whatsoever. I mean, testing, okay, that may make sense. It has its place, but what more important is that this can't be a way of life either. I mean, as whatever we're doing now is to get things up and running and to get us past the pandemic. It can't be something that we do forever.
Yeah.
You can't. It's just not sustainable. I mean, we don't want to be just, it's just like the parallel between 9/11 and the security checkpoint. I mean, we take our belts off and take our water out now, but we don't have to, but we do because nobody has the balls to change the regulation and move it backwards.
Yeah.
As because it's perceived as moving backwards, even though the machinery is in place to handle all this stuff. We've spent billions as an industry to put CTX machines in place and all these different, and guess what? We're still doing it. So on the other side of that, to finish off your earlier question, is a way out. We have to be able to find a way out once this is all said and done. But on top of that, we have to be able to turn it back on when the next time it happens. Because we've had SARS, we've had NARS, we have Ebola, we've had it all, but we've seen to throw out the book every time we get past it. We can't let that happen this time around. So that we have protocols in place that says, DEFCON 1, everybody, masks on, these are the procedures. We don't rewrite the book. It should be part of our IOSA, part of our emergency response plans, so that when this happens again, we don't have to shut the industry down as a result.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, and I think it's something that people are starting to come to terms with now, the sooner everybody starts to learn to live with it, the better we'll be able to get on with it. Well, my friend, listen, I certainly hope I bump into you somewhere soon, because I've always enjoyed your company. I look forward to a little bit of social time with you. It's absolutely flown by. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you great success for the year to come. And Willie, and I'd love to be in that room when the two of you have a little chat to say, and he says to you, well, Nick, what do you think we could do? I'd love to be there to listen to that one.
Yeah, it would be, I'm looking forward to that. I'll be able to debrief you for next time I see you.
Yeah, who knows? But listen, seriously, good luck. Well done. And good luck to everybody and all the rest of the team there. And please God, 2021 will have as many positive surprises as 2020 had some negative ones.
Thanks. And you know what? For what it's worth, I never take this stuff for granted. And I always harken back to where I came from and where I started. And I never would believe I'd be in a position to be able to have these conversations. And I truly appreciate the opportunity. So it goes both ways, sir.
Like a good boxer, eh? Stay hungry, stay humble.
That's it. All the best.
God bless, mate. Take care.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.